We are now live on YouTube.
Thank you very much. Good evening, members. Good evening, officers. Good evening, members of the public. Good evening, member of the Fourth Estate. Welcome. The Planning Applications Committee, starting on the 12th of August. Firstly, can we have the fire instructions, please?
Thank you, Chairman. There will be no fire drill tonight, and the fire alarm is allowed continuous ring. If the fire alarm rings, please leave the building promptly and calmly, using the stairs next to the lift if possible. The fire escape in the council chamber should only be used as a last resort. Do not stop to gather personal belongings and do not use the lift. The evacuation point is at street level in the Knoll Road car park. The assembly point is indicated by a green sign. Do not leave the assembly point until you are told it is safe to do so. And lastly, if you have reduced mobility and fire alarm rings, please make yourself known to myself.
Thank you very much. Before we proceed with the formal part of the meeting, it is a pleasure to welcome our new head of regulatory. Right, well, I'm not starting all that again. Gavin, would you like to proceed? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say a good evening to all members of the Planning Committee and of the President Exhibition today, and it's good to be at Surrey. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I wasn't quite ready. We will have apologies, please, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillor John Skipper and Councillor Helen Whitcroft. Councillor Mark Bagenham is acting as substitute for Councillor Skipper, and Councillor Rise is acting as substitute for Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, and welcome to both of you. Morgan, you're an old hand, but Sash, is this your first formal meeting?
It is indeed, Chair.
All right, excellent. Thank you for coming along. Are you in agreement that I signed the minutes of the last meeting?
Great.
Thank you. Declarations we will deal with on each item, which takes us through to the first item on page 9 of the agenda, which is 2230 Stirk Road, Frimley Green. And this item has been withdrawn, so deferred, and that is for noting members, which takes us on to the second item, on page 61, which is 50 Windsor Road, Chobham. Declarations, please, members. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I've been contacted both by residents that abut the site and also the applicant themselves. I've also been contacted by members of Chobham Parish Council who are involved with the applicant. And have sat through a number of debates with Chobham Parish Council as well.
Thank you. I've received some correspondence. I believe everybody else has, so I'll do a general declaration for the rest of us. Are there any other declarations to make on this one? No, thank you. And Mr. Bishop, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Excuse me, is this Windsor Road?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. We're both doing the mouse at the same time. Apologies.
Yeah, right, okay. Thank you. The application we bring before you this evening is an interesting one. It is one about planning balance. The application that you have this evening is for the redevelopment of the social club on Windsor Road in Chobham. As you can see here, it is the site that is essentially red on the left-hand side. And on the right, you will see a wider context plan of the general area. And this is basically, this is the club as we see it. As you can see, the site is predominantly hard surfaced. We have frontage developments that's characterised in this part of Windsor Road. In this part of what is postally addressed Windsor Road, but locally is known as Fowler's Mead or Fowler's Wells, there's a combination of names for this stretch of road. So for the purposes of this meeting, I will refer to it as the Slip Road. So it goes from this point of the north, and that's the work, from the north down to the south. Right, these are views of the site. So on the left-hand side, have a view looking south and east into the site. This is looking at the sort of the domed part of the club. You will see the established hedging. You will also see that at the moment you have got verges by the side of the club. Looking at the site from towards the south, which is you have the Slip Road straight ahead of you, you have Windsor Road to your left, you have the club straight ahead. This is a view from Windsor Road, again looking into the Slip Road from the southern end of Windsor Road. The one thing I'd like to draw members' attention to is the difference in levels of the houses just on the Slip Road. As you can see, they are in a slightly more elevated position than the application site. On the left-hand side, you will see the application site on the right, where the hedge is. You will see the bus stop, which is relevant to later on. And in the distance, you will see a development. There we go, just up here. That I just want to bring your attention to, because there will be a slide later on, and I just want to put it into the context of developments that are allowed in Chobham in recent times. These are shots of the club as it stands. So you have this is part of the car park at the southern end of the site. This is the domed part of the club. This bit here is this bit here, and so you can see that the building extends back. It has very little architectural merit as it stands. It is a building predominantly surrounded by car parking. This is looking towards Windsor Road at the northern end of the site. So again, characterised by verges. And then we are looking towards the south to the southern end of Windsor Road. So again, we have the club here. We have landscape convergence on the side of the road, and this is where the Chobham Rugby Club is. These are looking at the two grade 2 listed buildings. So this is number 56, which is this one here, which is the northern end of the site, and this is 44, which is Fowler's Well Farm, which is to the southeast of the site. Just to bring members' attention, these are the developments that are at the other, just that I showed in the previous, in the distance. This is a converted building here, which is a combination of flats. And then this is the development that is just been recently completed on site of what was Vicky Stores. These houses are about 9.5 metres high. This is the application that we have before us this evening. It is proposed to redevelop the site and replace the social club at the southern end with a car park here that will have 13 spaces for the club and 1 space for plot 1, which is here, which is a 2-bedroom dwelling. We'll have a terrace of 4 dwellings here. We will have a pair of semi-detached houses here and a detached house in this location here. Coming round onto Slip Road, there are two detached dwellings at this point and this point. The existing access points will be reused for two of the areas, but a new access point will be created for here, which is plots 5 and 6 for their parking, and also down here to serve the club itself. These are the proposed dwelling, proposed floor plan elevations for the social club. As you can see, this is a traditional building form. It is brick with tile and dormer details, which is seen from the area. And again, we have tile hanging, we have dormers, we have gable features, we have a mixture of hipped and ridged roofs. And again, we have details that you will see. So you have detailing in the dormers, pitched roofs. And again, plots 8 and 9, which are on the Slip Road. These two face into the site and the side onto the Slip Road. I'm just bringing up this plan, so it's in your pack to do with the garden areas, as you'll see from the committee report. We have an outstanding issue with 2 of the garden sizes, and again, that's part and parcel of what we're thinking about in the planning balance. And this is a proposed street scene from Windsor Road, so you'll see the social club here. You'll have the terrace here, the parent semis here, and that's plot 7 again. So you have these two bookending the road. As you will see from the committee report, there's been a detailed analysis of the scheme, both in terms of yes, there's a detailed analysis in the committee report. As you will see, we have clearly looked at all the material considerations when we have addressed this scheme. We have come to a view on balance that it is acceptable because of the benefits that will arise. We will get family housing, which is needed in Chobham. We will get, or the proposal will secure a new social club. The proposal will provide additional landscaping and a greener environment that we currently see on the site. Although we do acknowledge in the committee report that to do so, the hedge at the moment this is there will be removed and then replaced. But the view is taken that as a short-term loss in the overall planning balance, this was acceptable. This would be controlled by condition and also by a landscape management plan going forward. There's an update to the report in that the County Highway Authority have confirmed that because some of the plots cannot achieve on-site turning, they have amended their condition just to relate to parking. But subject to that, the recommendations to grant subject to conditions and a legal agreement to secure sound. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Before we go any further, can I just check that the previous consent, because this is not the first time this has been to this committee, previous permission is an extant permission?
The permission that we have on the site is only for part of the site, it's for the social club at the southern end of the site. And it is extant subject to the provisions that the government brought in last year to do with COVID and extended permission. But it didn't relate to the housing. The housing got withdrawn back in 2017.
Thank you. Clarification. Thank you for that. We have some speakers, and I'm looking at the screens. First up on my list, hopefully they are there, is Mr. and Mrs. Lewis. Kirsty, are Mr. and Mrs. Lewis in the room?
We're here.
Good evening, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Just for procedure, you will have 4 minutes from when you start speaking, and the team will advise you when you have 1 minute left. And the time will start whenever you're ready. I can't see you at the moment, but hopefully you'll come on screen. Thank you.
I don't know why. But I lost why. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The camera's not on, so we could tell them. The camera's not on, that's why we can't see them.
Yeah, we can hear you, but your camera doesn't appear to be on.
Right.
Go on.
Sorry, I can't see.
Bottom left next to the microphone.
So possibly bottom left-hand corner.
We'll have to do it without the sound if you can't do it. Without the camera.
I can usually
Don't worry.
Stop.
Don't panic.
do it.
You should have a little camera with a red line through it at the bottom. If you click on that, it will bring you into vision.
It's not here.
It's
It's
gone out.
nothing. It's everything's. Like we can see you, but I can't see it.
Don't worry, darling. Don't worry. Let me carry on.
Okay, we'll crack on. We can
Yes.
you
Sorry
can-
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
The
I'm
time-
happy.
The time is ready when you start. So please
Right.
crack on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We got.
We have you.
There we are.
I'm on. Am I
Right.
talking now?
Yes.
Right. Good evening. My name's Brian Lewis. I've lived at Fowler's Wells Farm since 1974. And can I start off with 2 plus points before I do the rest of it? I'm very pleased to see that you've achieved lower ground level and also the noise barrier. We're quite grateful for those. Some points going on, if you could bear with me. 733 says the operation of various clubs and things that are going on in that building. And one is a brass band. And at the preliminary parish meeting, the lady from the club said to my request about what's happening to the brass band, she said, the venue will be too small and we don't propose to operate the brass band, but it appears in this write-up. So I don't know if someone could look at the small print of that, I would be grateful. Then we go on to 752. This is about the situation or location, I guess you guys would call it, of the cottage, and it's 19 meters on this write-up, but that's never really been verified. I guess that was my measurement from the original complaint. And now it says the fact that the building would face the front of the dwelling is not considered that there would be any material loss of privacy or overbearing or overshadowing effects. I'm at a loss how this can be said, because we still have a smoker's corner, which we violently objected to, completely in line with our drive. And there's no mention of aircon noise or anything of that. So maybe you could look at the finer points of that. And going on to 753, it would appear, if you, to my reading of that you are not putting any noise levels on the output from this building. It would appear that you're leaving it up to the licensing authority. And I would suspect that if that is left as the case, then they could go, the club itself could go to the licensing authority with the passage of time and say, please, could you remove these restrictions? But maybe I'm dreaming. Whoever's right or wrong, I'm sure you can sort it out. And on the dB limits, it's saying they will be applied, but it doesn't say what the output
You have
would
1
be.
minute remaining. 1 minute
Okay,
remaining.
thank you. Thank you for your time. My wife has something to say.
As we have stated before, we would like to point out that 12 plus 1 parking places is totally inadequate. In fact, last night, there were over 13 cars in the car park, Wednesday nights. The road outside the cottage is very, very narrow, and it's with no footpaths, and also services the rugby club with a vast amount of cars, any parking will impede any ambulance or emergency people, fire engines or police coming either to the club, to the houses, or to the.
That's 4 minutes. Your time's up.
Thank you.
Please
very much.
Sorry, Mr. Knowles, please finish your section if you had that. Please feel free just to finish off, rather than cut you off midstream. Or have you finished?
Yes, that was fine. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Say that, please. Members, do you have any questions of a planning nature for the speakers?
What's he saying?
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Lewis, for your representation. In terms of the smokers' corner, from your opinion, is there a more suitable area within the site for that to be located that would be less detrimental on your property?
I think that it would be better on the far side towards Windsor Road, because the residential houses over there are much, much further away than our cottage. And also we are on a slightly different level. The cottage is quite on a little hump, if you can put it like that. And it's going to be quite affected by that area, which is exactly opposite us.
Gates.
And the gates.
Thank you. And one further question, if I may, Chair, thank you. When you're coming out of your property, obviously your driveway slopes down a little bit.
Yeah.
What's the visibility like there? So when you're pulling out onto Windsor Road, I'm assuming that you turn left when you come out of your property and then onto Windsor Road, or do you turn right and go round the loop because of visibility? What's the visibility like?
It's pretty grim, and actually an ambulance cannot get up our drive. It's too steep. Ambulances and any large vehicles can't get down because they bottom out. So anything that's slightly large has to park at the bottom of the drive, and it's not very easy to see either. Thank you.
And my third and final question, I promise, Chair, thank you for indulging me, is from your perspective and from your recollection, and I appreciate this is only your recollection, have there been very many occasions when the club, as it's operating, has required parking for more than 12 cars?
Obviously not recently, but in the past it has been very difficult. And on occasions we've had to ask for help to get out of our drive.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Members, any other questions of planning nature? No, thank you very much indeed to you both. And we now have Mrs. Duke and Mr. Scott possibly coming on separate Zoom. I can see, I assume that...
We don't want to hear this, do we?
No.
Mr. Scott in front of me. Going to say anything else? I guess. Mr. Scott, welcome. Mrs. Duke, yes. Hello. Who's speaking first? You have your 4 minutes between you, and again, the 1 minute warning will be given. Time will start when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. As you heard, my name's Kevin Scott from Solve Planning, and we're the agents for the application. I'm very conscious officers have provided you with a detailed report and a presentation, and hopefully you'll have received the briefing note from the club explaining a little bit more about the background to this project, which I hope shows both how we've worked with officers to enable the scheme to be recommended for approval, but also how this is linked so strongly to the future of Chobham Club. And rather than take up your time this evening by repeating this information, we thought it would be helpful to give an idea of how vital the club is to its members, and equally how important it is to the community in general. So I'd like to hand over to Sue Duke, who I think can express this an awful lot better than I can, but I would be happy to answer questions members might have following that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. I moved to Chobham on the 26th of June in 1983 with my parents, Norman and Pat, who became the steward and stewardess of Chobham Working Men's Club. I remember being anxious as a 16-year-old who'd lived in a very close environment for all my life as a child from the Armed Forces family. However, I needn't have worried, as they all were made to feel very much part of the club's community very quickly. So here starts the Chobham Club adventure. I remember in the early years, the club was always heaving, members waiting outside for Dad to open up to either get a seat, depending on what was going on, or to put their name down to play snooker, darts, dominoes, crib, to name but a few. Saturday night dances where members came from all over the county, as the club's dance hall was the biggest and best in Surrey. CRU dinners, darts, competitions, race nights, bingo twice a week, Christmas and New Year parties. There was always something going on, and you had to be there early to get a seat. The club family also ran days out. This was mainly horse racing and days out to other CRU clubs to enter competitions in darts, snooker, dominoes, shove opening. They also ran Ladies' Day to Ascot, which I went to for 10 years with the club family. I met my now husband, Robert, at the club, a Chobham boy with web feet. They aren't really, it's just a saying if you were born and bred in Chobham. I celebrated many milestone birthdays there, and in 1991 held our wedding reception there for the first time in many years. 2016, we celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary and had a party with the club's family. And if it hadn't been for COVID, in April this year, we'd have celebrated our 30th with the club family. 3 children and 1 grandson down the line are now part of the Chobham Club community, as are many members. Mum even came out of retirement at one stage to help with running the bar in the afternoons. I hold so many memories, happy and sad, as many older members, including my dad, are no longer with us. But many children and grandchildren are still part of the club's community, and hopefully it will continue.
1 minute remaining.
The building itself has not fared well in the past few years. This, I believe, is because the club now has fallen into disrepair and has outlived its useful life. Financially, it's not cost effective, as many of the amenities are so outdated. The building looks tired and outdated, so it would be nice to have a new clubhouse to make many more memories for all of the Chobham community. I read this to my mum and she smiled and said, "Yep, Sue, that's it in a nutshell." The next day, she fell asleep and is now with my dad and rather a lot of the old community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. Members, do you have questions for Planning Nature? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you both for your presentation and certainly for yours, which is very moving. And I absolutely agree that the Chobham Club has been a really important central point for
question is, Councillor Wheeler, not a speech.
Can you tell me, please, how many of your members are residents in Chobham? And what your overall membership is, please?
Overall membership is 200. I don't think I can give you a breakdown of how many live within the village specifically. But the focus, as I understand it, has always been on Chobham and as part of that Chobham community.
Thank you. I understand that we have heard, lovely tales of people coming from all over the county for events and things. And as I said, it's been a central part of the village. And I'm quite sure that in terms of membership, I was going to have very clear information.
Is there a question coming?
Yeah, the question is, could we please find facts as to how many people that attend the club and are members of the club are actually residents in the village, because it's a material consideration when it comes to the number of parking spaces that are being provided, Chair.
I can't give you that breakdown, but what I can say is that the development complies with the standards that Surrey County Council have been looking for in terms of that form of use and that level of floor area. And that's what we've designed the scheme to meet. I can't give you a breakdown of individual membership. I'd also say that it's perhaps more important that we comply with the relevant standards. That's the definitive benchmark for measuring the scheme, I would say.
Councillor Wheeler,
Yeah, if I can, I believe that the planning standards are based on it being a social club within the centre of the village, as opposed to a social club which has a wide membership. And I'm looking to Sarita for guidance on that. No, that's not the case. It's just any building that can host any number of people.
The social club is a social club where you don't limit it to the type of people that can go there. Use the weed control and plan.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rise.
Moving on from Councillor Wheeler's questions in terms of is the parking as provided, is that deemed sufficient for the use of the building?
In
Is
terms
that
of
a question to me or Sarita?
yes,
Yeah, no, I would guess that to Mr. Scott and to Mr. Bishop as well.
Just from my point of view, just reiterating what I said, that it was designed to meet the specific council standards. So I would say yes on that basis.
Are there any questions, other questions for the speakers, please? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. I just wondered what kind of land height analysis had been done, because as the images show, the land does bank up and it banks up around the back of the application as well. So I just wondered from the planner's point of view.
Sorry, is this a question for the speakers or for Mrs. Bishop?
It's a question for the speakers in terms of their understanding of the properties at the rear of the property of the site, the houses at the rear of the site and the heights thereof.
The drawing would have been based on a survey which would have been taking into account ground levels and the usual heights of adjoining buildings.
Any other questions for the speakers? No, thank you very much indeed to both of you. Mrs. Bishop, I knew you wanted to come in, but we now move to the officers. But before we do that, please, Councillor Wheeler, you called this one in. Can I ask you to briefly explain why, please?
Indeed, Councillor Hawkins. I called it in on street scene, overdevelopment of the property, insufficient parking, the context of the development, much as I accept all of the points that are made, we'll have the opportunity to look a little bit later around the properties that are around the access road or the link road, as we're calling it, and the properties that are directly opposite and the type of houses. This is at the entrance to Chobham. It's just before we hit the conservation area. It's in quite an important area, and I know that we all admire the efforts of Surrey County Highways in terms of responding to concerns that we make. But there are two properties in this scheme that have no patent access to them, and I have got serious concerns about safety there. I've got concerns about the impact of the height of the site. I've got concerns about the impact of the development on the listed buildings that go all around it. And I've got neighbourhood concerns in terms of noise, displaced parking and use. I would, however, say that I am really supportive of the club. So it's a conflict. I just think the site is overdeveloped. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. No, Mrs. Bishop.
Can I go back to the slides?
Sorry.
Yes, please.
Okay, just go a little bit slower, please.
Whilst we're just doing that, Councillor Taylor, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, I did ask if I could speak on this, Mr. Chairman. I did inform Mr. Scott.
Right. Well, speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the club was started in 1920 for the soldiers returning from the 1914-18 war, and they had the British Legion in there for many years. and the club saw fit to send them packing. So I do have a bit of a gripe there, but more to the plan. The enhanced bus shelter, great, but no buses. There were no buses in Chobham, so really putting in an enhanced bus shelter serves no purpose at all. The buses go south from that bus stop, and therefore it takes anybody away from the settled area and puts them into Woking. There's nowhere to get off the bus of any consequence once anybody got on a bus, which there aren't after about 7 in the evening, and there's definitely none on Sundays. So putting in the enhanced bus shelter really is a red herring, in my opinion. This is supposed to be a community building with 200 members. From personal knowledge in the past, because I have been a member of the club and my father was a member before me, having attended a party in the original club some 60 plus years ago. So they've got 200 members coming from all over Camberley, Woking, all around the area, and they have 13 parking spaces. And that will have to include the staff that comes to, run the club itself and members, because quite often they have committee members there. So really, it has got to be looked at as inadequate. If this had been any other commercial building, would we really have considered to allow them to sell off their car park, because that's what it's boiled down to, sell off their car park and park within the roads surrounding the club? When you consider the slip road at the back, as Mrs. Lewis said, it is very narrow, and anything parking there does impede the emergency services. The other place is the main Windsor Road, which already has parking for the houses on the other side of the road. So that isn't going to be easy. And the next road is either Fowler's Mead, which is a quiet cul-de-sac, or Leslie Road, which again is a cul-de-sac. And again, there's a lot of resident parking. So there really isn't parking in the area for this overspill. It's very unneighbourly, because this is a alleged community building for weddings, christenings, birthdays, anniversaries, wakes, and they come from far afield. Where are all these cars going to go? And where are all these people going to go? It really is going to be very disruptive, and this is really done for commercial gain. The other loss is the hedge. Now, the hedge at the moment probably stands 15, 20 foot high. It needs a good cut, but that's because Surrey County Council hasn't been out and cut it. The loss of this hedge will impact on that road, the Windsor Road, immensely, because I know we had the garage and Vicky's, which were new developments on old sites. The garage wasn't too bad. Vicky's was a bit bigger, but it was acceptable because we had the hedges that go down in front of Fowler's Mead and in front of the club. We are a village. We are not a town. We are a village, and it is important to keep some of these green highways for the birds and the bees. And it really is, this is purely commercial gain and greed and nothing else. There's been no thought about anybody around it. And can we honestly turn around and say to people, yep, we let them have it. Now you've got people parking all in front of your drives. You can't get out, but that's tough. They made some money. And I think it is appalling that we even consider putting this amount of houses on this site when people have sold off their car park. We wouldn't allow it anywhere else. And I really implore the committee not to allow it now, because once we start allowing people to sell off car parks, sell off places where which are needed for that establishment. to work
Councillor Tedder,
effectively.
Councillor Tedder, can I just say, I think we've got, you are beginning to sort of drift
Yeah,
into areas which
I've
are,
almost finished, Mr.
as you
Chairman.
well know, Councillor Tedder.
I've almost finished, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
For the sake of good order, can I point out that Councillor Tedder, you are, as a councillor, you are at liberty to speak to this committee, but you do not have a vote at this committee.
Correct.
And thank you for your comments. Mrs. Bishop, please.
Right, okay, where should we start? With regard to the comments made by Mr. and Mrs. Lewis about the smoking area, we agree with them. You'll see from your report that we put a condition on sending more details of the smoking area because we don't think it's in the right place either. So we agree and have dealt with it on that basis. With regard to the question about the height of the building, as members will see from their report, there is a condition to do with levels. The proposal needs to sit properly in that street scene, and the council needs to retain control to make sure that that happens. And the way that we will do that is to make sure that the levels are appropriate. As it stands, the levels will be reduced, so we're going down towards the Windsor Road level. So in terms of the relationship to the properties on the slip road, they will become higher and the development will become lower. With regard to the question about noise and disturbance, say for example in the air conditioning units, a condition is proposed that will provide details of the technical specification to make sure that there is no adverse noise issue arising from that. With regard to the comments about the brass bands, that related to how it was previously used. There is a reduction in floor area, so that by itself will limit the activities that will take place. Notwithstanding that, any development on this site that will generate that noise is subject to the Environmental Protection Act. So it will be subject to making sure that that isn't a noise nuisance and that is administered by Environmental Health. That is a statutory protection in terms of noise. We wouldn't necessarily duplicate licensing legislation, but in terms of matters to do with noise levels, that is something that would be monitored by Environmental Health and would be potentially part of their license. As a license comes in, the planning authority is one of the relevant bodies that would be consulted, so that if something were to come in that would, in our view, be a conflict with the objectives of our legislation, we would obviously make representations to the licensing authority at that time. With regard to the parking, I have had detailed conversations with the County Highway Authority, both in terms of the parking numbers and in terms of the visibility displays and the pedestrian environment. They are content, or they will not raise an objection in relation to the provision of parking for the social club. They believe the amount of floor space that is being proposed, it is within their standards, and they raise no objection in this regard. They are satisfied with the visibility displays such that vehicle drivers will see pedestrians and vice versa, and they do not raise objection to the proposal in terms of the pedestrian environment. So that is basically those issues. One of the things I would say is that one of the conditions also relates to a car park management plan, and that will also seek to address any potential issues relating to oversplit. So the council will always retain control over how the club is operating its car parking. And if members are minded to approve this permission and this application, the council would retain control over how that car park would be managed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bishop. Councillor White.
I know I can't vote on this because I was late in, but I can comment.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. We're spending a lot of time.
I will get the line of the Constitution.
Councillor Rice. Well, Councillor Rice and then Russell Pinchot. Councillor Rice.
Thank you. Just regarding the parking, and I note the point that you made about the county highways authority saying that it's based on the floor space. So is this how their allocation of parking spaces is done? Is it on floor space or on people? Because I would like to add is that cars bring in people. So I would just imagine that if we have a 13 spaces of a car that on average that has 5 spaces, that most that's going to be an allocation of 65 people. So is that the expectation of the amount of people that can be in there at any one time?
In terms of the occupation of the building, I can't say categorically. I can't say. But the County Highway Authority, based on submitted floor plans that we have got, have said there is no objection to it on the number of parking spaces.
Yeah, thank you. The rules changed not that long ago, were in fact, which were approved by council on the governance working group, or whatever it's called, and regretfully, you are not able to take part in the debate. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, I'll just turn that on. I'm slightly surprised, in addition to the parking, to only see one disabled parking space. Because my understanding was that there was a minimum requirement of 2 disabled parking spaces for this number of parking or this kind of location. But I'm very happy to be corrected on that. And the other matter as well, while we're on the subject of parking, is the parking provisions. And please do not tell me that it's in line with county parking standards, because we're very well aware of that. However, there is an emerging neighbourhood plan which has a different standard, and there is a neighbourhood plan which relates to a very similar village that has a very different standard. So the amount of parking that's provided here is at the lower end. It's just the minimum county standard end for car parking with this number of properties. And in addition to that, going back to something that was commented on by the planning officer, who I would like to thank for trying to get Highways to look at this. I am so aware of how hard we have tried, and I feel very let down by county in this respect.
Councillor Wheeler, please stop making speeches. Please get to the point.
Disabled parking, is that in line? Because my understanding is that it should be a minimum of 2 spaces for an events thing of this kind, and also to bring to all of the other members' attention the parking standards that are there, and also the minimum recreation standards for a property of those size in terms of green space, which also is below our own standards and what we recommend within our design guide.
Sorry, Councillor, I missed that last little bit.
It was residential amenity space, and also the arrangement of the buildings in line with our own design guide, and it's not in keeping with that.
In terms of the disabled spaces, the County Highway again did not raise an objection to that level of provision. It's again, if we were to try and refuse that, they would say they would support us. So that's an issue. And I'm really sorry to say this to you, because I know that you don't want, that it's not something that is really helpful in this circumstance. But as it stands at the moment, the standards that we have to work to for the purposes of determining planning applications are the county standards. With the emerging neighbourhood plan and all the standards that come with that, when that gets to a stage where it is adopted, it will have more weight for the purposes of planning decision making. But at the moment, it is the county standards that we are to work to when we are considering how applications are to be determined. So I'm sorry that's not the answer that you're looking for, but that is the answer that I have to give you. In terms of the residential amenity space for the houses, as you'll see from the report, we've made a balanced decision. 2 of the plots do not comply with our standard. In terms of the overall scheme itself, the houses meet the space standards set by the government for the internal environments, and they're fine on that. But with regard to the gardens, and we have two that are substandard. I would also just like to go back to Councillor Taylor's point. I forgot about the hedge. We recognise that there is a harm associated with the loss of that hedge. We clearly state that in the report, and that is one of the things that we have had to balance. The landscape will go back, but it is something that we recognise is part of the planning balance. So as you can see, it's not been a straightforward application. It has had lots of things we've had to think about, but we've come down in the planning balance with a recommendation to grant.
Thank you. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. I have no problems with this particular proposal. Some of them have been mentioned. Amenity spaces is clearly one of them, and the other one is the access to the club for commercial vehicles. And we appear to become uncharacteristically lenient in bending over backwards to grant permission for this particular proposal. There is a comment in the presentation notes that have been provided to us in the agenda that basically says all of these problems will go away simply if they reduce the number of houses that they want to build by one. The club, as the applicant had told us that if that was to happen, the whole scheme would become financially unviable. The cynic in me says, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? So my question is, have we actually seen the project costings for this particular project? And do we agree with the club's assertion that if the number of properties were reduced by one in order to give everybody the amenity space that they should have and to provide all of the facilities and ease of turning for commercial vehicles and so on and so forth, and even maybe the 2 disabled parking spaces that Councillor Wheeler wants to have for this particular place, do we agree to the club's assertion that if we were to reduce the number of properties by one, that the project itself would be financially unviable? Thank you.
And before we go back on that, I'm going to bring in Councillor Alloway and then Councillor Betton, Councillor Gordon. The same rules apply to you as to Councillor White. I'm going to be even-handed on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a question maybe the officer may be able to answer. So the site as it is and the site size of the club building is proposed looks to be about a reduction of 2/3, and that building will be limited to capacity via regulations.
It wouldn't be limited for capacity under the Planning Act. I'm not an expert in licensing, so I don't know if there would be limits under the licensing legislation. So that would be, if it's a health and safety issue, that normally falls under something to do with licensing rather than the planning regime.
Yeah, I was just trying to put in the context how many people out of the 200 members might pitch up at time. I guess I can only refer to the context in our club. Our club is 700 members, and you're lucky to get 100 turn up at one time. We haven't got a car park to accommodate 100 members, so they will be parked on the street. But a club is very, very important to a sector of the village community.
Councillor Betton.
Thank you, Chair. This hopefully is an easy question. You have 9 plots. How many bedrooms are in those 9 plots? I can't really tell the majority of this one.
I draw your attention to paragraphs 4.3 and 4.3 in the report. We have got, for ease of reference, I did actually write it down because I can't always remember. In the terrace, we've got 1 2-bedroom and 3 3-bedroom. The semis, which are plots 5 and 6, are 3-bedroom. Plot 7 and plot 8 are 4-bedroom, and plot 9 is 3-bedroom.
How many bedrooms is that? 20.
You're the mathematician, I mean,
No,
20.
I'm a biologist, numbers.
I'm not, is he?
I think it was 20 or 21, I can't remember.
21 bedrooms. So how many people are we expecting? And how many car parking spaces are there allocated for that?
The floor plans will set out the bed spaces in the dwellings, because that's one of the queries that we have, because the space standards that the government issue relate to the number of bedrooms and the number of people. So the scheme was amended to make sure that they would comply with the relevant space standard. For me, I would have to go and have a look at the plans, bear with me 1 minute.
Do you have a supplementary question, Councillor Beckney?
I just don't feel that there are enough car parking spaces to accommodate the people who are going to be living in these houses.
That's not what parking standards based on, unfortunately.
It is the recommended parking standards, which we are doing our best, and we're fighting an uphill battle. We will win that eventually. We have our own standards, but I hope we're still all councillors by the time that happens. It's all down to the local plan process, and that was arduous last night. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not actually sure this is a planning issue, but bear with me. You know, this has been a community club for 100 years, so I assume it belongs to the community and it all belongs to the membership of the club. What I'm saying is, whoever donated the land in the first place, could there be covenants on it that would prevent this actually happening?
You're quite right, it's not a planning matter. Land covenants do not relate to what we deal with under the planning regime.
Councillor Page, no. Members, we've spent some sort of time on this. Councillor Tappert, is it very quick? And is it a new point, please?
No, Chair. What it is I simply haven't had my question answered.
No, I beg your pardon, you haven't. You're quite right. I do apologise. I stopped you and then we got sidetracked.
Sorry, I apologise. The short answer to your question is no, because the scheme that we have from a planning point of view did not go into the realms of viability, because in planning terms that normally goes to things like affordable housing. With regard to this scheme, as you will see from the report, we believe, you know, that one less house would make a scheme that addresses the potential shortfalls of the scheme as a whole. However, they have asked us to consider it on its merits. So whether or not what they say is right or not, we have to determine the application that we have in front of us.
Councillor Wheeler, is it a new point?
It's a new point, and actually it's a proposal that I would be really grateful if we could vote upon. I would like to say that the two slightly different ones. First and foremost, we don't actually have all the information that we need to determine this. We don't have the site of the smoking area, which is something which is material to whether or not it's going to have an adverse impact on residential community. We don't have the details of, and I think we're all very aware of the impact of air conditioning and or heat recycling units. We don't have any of the details of that within this planning application. So two things, either I feel that we should defer until we've got the details on that, or secondly, I'd actually like to propose that we refuse this application on the basis that it doesn't, that although it adheres to the minimum parking standards that are laid out by county, it doesn't adhere to our minimum standards in terms of good development and good building, that it's overdevelopment and not in keeping with the street scene, and that there is a loss of the green corridor on the entrance to the village. So that's, and there, I appreciate, I'm not going to put parking in it because I know that that's going to get it thrown out. So but we can, I feel, either not determine as a result of insufficient information, or alternatively, we could move to refuse the application on the basis of the fact that it doesn't meet our minimum standards, it has an adverse effect on the impact on driving to the village, and in its overdevelopment of the site, and it has an adverse impact on the street scene as in keeping.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I will ask the committee in due course as to how they wish to address the options on that one. Councillor Rice, did I see you wish to speak? Is there a fresh point? Again, be brief, please.
It's a point that hasn't been made. It's just regarding parking. I've just looked up, do correct me if I'm wrong, but the county recommended guidance says that for residential units in a rural village setting require 2 spaces for 4 and 3 bedroom properties. And as far as I can tell, do correct me if I'm wrong, this is what is not provided by this.
As members may be aware, we have had detailed discussions with the county council in terms of their representation. They are not raised objection on the level of parking that is being provided.
But it's not in keeping with their own standards, though.
They would not raise an objection to it. They have not raised an objection to it on parking.
They have their own standards.
It's recommended, it's not required. Members, we've been through this, we've discussed this at length. There is first and foremost, we have a recommendation, an officer recommendation to grant. Is there a proposer and a seconder for that recommendation? Right. If we are following that line, we would then be making a recommendation to refuse the application. And I have written down here, we need firm planning reasons before we go on those.
Can I just come in on the deferral question which Councillor Wheeler raised? Sarita already explained that both the smoking shelter and also the issue with the AC units can be conditioned. That's a completely reasonable way of dealing with things, and we shouldn't be deferring a matter where we already have a solution in place to deal with that. Those would be matters which would come at a later date. We would consult with the EHO on those details at that particular point in time. And so I think there is a mechanism in place in that respect.
Yes, Councillor Brina.
Right. Thank you, Chair. So therefore, the reasons that I gave a bit earlier, I would like to recommend that we refuse the application based on those reasons. Happy to run through again.
I think I've got most of them written down here, but I'm sure you'll correct me, because ultimately the final wording will be decided between the officers, you and I, and the ward member, which is you. So, and Councillor Tedder. So the reasons I have got here, is overdevelopment, the concern at the heights, the impact on the listed buildings, noise generation, and level of car parking, not the actual car parking standards, but the level of car parking for the operation of the village hall. And we're coming back to confirm. Those are the reasons that I have written down here.
I'm sorry if I missed it, but did we get street scene, overdevelopment and amenity?
Street scene, overdevelopment, impact on listed buildings, noise generation, and the insufficient information on the parking for the operation of the hall facility.
Can maybe mention the fact that it's not, I appreciate the authority concerned has commented, but are we able to mention that it doesn't meet the minimum standards laid down by county?
There's a number of issues which are being raised here. Perhaps if you can finish your run through first, and then I'll jump in.
I was hoping that that was enough.
Okay.
So spend some time on this. Yes.
So firstly, to deal with the minimum standards, you have to be extremely careful imposing a reason against a highway experts in this particular case, which is the County Highways Authority, which is the body that we need to rely upon. I would be very concerned if members decided to go down that route, having an argument over parking issues when we've already, Sarita's already advised, we've tested this with council several times already. However, if there's a wider argument over the overdevelopment, then that's clearly a different issue. Councillor Hawkins, on a separate point, just raised the issue over the listed buildings. I don't recall that actually being something which was fully raised as a concern when you read out your issues. I had down about overdevelopment, not in keeping with the street scene, and you also mentioned about loss of a green corridor. And so I just need to be clear as to precisely what the reasons we're putting forward. Is it the number of units on the site? Is it the layout of the site? Is it the plot sizes? What precisely elements of the scheme do you as members have in mind, so we can be precise in the reason for refusal, because that's what we need to ensure.
Can I just come in? I'm picking up the comments from the speakers on the impact on the listed buildings, and I think Councillor Wheeler at one stage, about 2 or 3 hours ago, did mention that there was a issue with the listed building. Councillor Wheeler, are you? I feel we have enough here for the committee to reach a decision, subject to the final wording being agreed with between the officers, you and I, and Councillor Tedder. So members, those are the reasons. I think we've all heard those. Those are the reasons for recommendation for refusal. Is there a proposal, a seconder to refuse?
Sorry, Councillor Hawkins, I just need to be clear on the reasons for refusal to make sure that we're being absolute as to precisely the reasons. So I asked a minute ago, is what is it particularly about it in respect of overdevelopment? Is it in the number of units on the site? Is it the overall layout members have concerns with? I would also like to understand the specific concerns over the impact on the listed building, when I believe the conservation officer did not raise any concerns in that respect. So again, it's understanding the specifics of that before we proceed with the reason for refusal.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. I think we probably have sufficient with the fact that it doesn't meet our own minimum design standards within the development in all cases. In terms of that's amenity space, isn't it? So in terms of amenity space, it's not in keeping with the street scene in the immediate area. I appreciate a little bit further down the road, a bit further down the road, there is a site that has a different type of development, but that was the conversion of a commercial building that lost all the commercial element, and it's also a slightly different area within the village as well. So not in keeping.
Sorry, Councillor Wheeler, can we just get the bullet points, please?
Okay, so not in keeping with the street scene. Insufficient amenity space to meet our own standards. Overdevelopment, which again kind of links back to street scene. So I don't know exactly what the best way of expressing that is, and maybe we could work on the wording in that respect separately. The loss of the green corridor in the entrance to the conservation area, and much as I appreciate the comment on the fact that the conservation officer didn't raise an objection to the impact on the listed buildings, we need to be mindful of the fact that we just won an appeal that's just been upheld in our favour, where the conservation officer didn't raise any objections to that building whatsoever. So I appreciate that they haven't raised it, but I don't think it's unreasonable for us to raise it, given the different heights. Thank you.
That's much more helpful. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
And in terms of, as Councillor Hawkins already said, in terms of precise reasoning, if we can agree that with the chair and vice chair, and we'll circulate that.
And ward members.
And ward members, absolutely.
Yes.
Just a point from Councillor Wheeler. I'm a bit uneasy to actually allow reason for refusal to include this. If you look at the current site of the building, which is probably not in keeping with the existing street scene at present, and the overall development would be an improvement to what's currently there at the moment. So I would be very uneasy to actually put that as a reason as part of being as part of the actual design and character, given there's been support also by our design officer as well.
So can I just go on that? I think over the development, certainly the concern I picked up from other members has been the quantum, the number of rooms, the actual bulk of the buildings, and the number of rooms that comprise it are to be included in the building. Councillor Wheeler,
It's just also to mention that at the moment the building is fairly invisible in that it's a single-storey dwelling. It's low level. It has a lot of parking, green space, and hedges around it. And right at the rear of the building, there is the access to the rugby club. So its relationship with listed buildings, it's in the centre of the plot with shrubs around it. I think we've probably got a photograph somewhere that shows that. So this would be very difficult. We're also losing the hedges at the moment. I appreciate that would be conditioned to be reinstated, but it takes time.
Good, that's the photos. Use the photos, please. Yeah. Next one. I can click.
Can we have the microphone on, please?
I just want to make a couple of points. I'd just like to make a couple of points in terms of the listed buildings. The listed building, if I can get the next one. As you can see, this is the listed building here. It is screened by an evergreen hedge here. It is a higher level. The proposal will be at a lower level. So I just want to bring that to members' attention when deciding on the impact on the listed buildings, because our conservation officer has not raised an objection. This is also the listed building at the northern end of the site. Again, it is set back and it's screened by a hedge. So when we're looking at the impact on the listed buildings, we just need to be sure that we are clear on what that impact is. We have a degree of separation between the buildings, and we have screening, and the buildings are set back from their front. The other point that was made, as you can see, with part of the club building is two-storey in this location here. It has very little architectural merit, but I take Councillor Wheeler's point on board, like the quantum of development. I think that's where you are heading. Thank you.
And it's also from the front.
Councillor Wheeler, go on.
Yeah, thank you. There was one a bit earlier to show the hedge along the front, which you cannot on the entrance to the village on the main road. You see that side view as you're coming in, but actually in terms of Windsor Road, it's behind the hedge there. That the one on the right hand side there shows the visibility of the club. So the bottom right hand one there shows the visibility of the club on the entrance to the village, so it's not visible.
So can we just clarify whether or not members still want to have a reason for refusal in respect of the listed buildings?
No. Okay. I didn't hear it right. Okay. So that is deleted. The rest of the reasons stand. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, for clarification, just to help, I've got doesn't meet minimum design standards, not in keeping with the street scene, is insufficient amenity space, overdevelopment, the quantum built form, loss of green corridor to the entrance to conservation area, which is a more wider consideration, and that's pretty much what I've got, unless I've missed anything.
And the space standard relates to the analysis.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for that. Okay, members. proposed and seconded, Councillor Tapper, Councillor Betton, all those in agreement with reasons to refuse? Just for the record, Councillors Barnett, White and Gordon are unable to vote on this item.
Voting in favour of the officer, of the new proposal to refuse. Councillors Betton, Lewis, Perry, Ratteram, Marbagenham, Tapper, Wheeler, Ride and Hawkins.
I'll ask for good form against. Abstentions?
Voting in abstention, Councillor Alloway.
Thank you, members. The recommendation to refuse is carried. Now on to
just for clarity, and Eddie, you may need to clarify the situation. So it's just advised me that we'll need to put the SAM reason for refusal on, because the legal agreement has not actually been confirmed for that yet. So in terms of our duty under the Habitat regs, that's the standard approach we would take with such an application. And if members are agreeable to that, perhaps we can just have another vote on that point, standard wording that we have on SAM that we typically use, which again will circulate to members.
Members, are we in agreement for that? That is unanimous. Thank you. Right, moving on to item 3 on page 107, 1 Middle Close. This item is deferred. But can I thank members that and the office of members that turned up, that came to attended the site meeting. Thank you very much indeed, and for arranging this. And I assume that those members that attended the site meeting will be considered having attended for the next occasion before anybody else asks. I wasn't quite sure myself. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Does that also apply to the regular members of the committee who didn't attend because the substitutes attended instead, expecting this item to be discussed today when the substitutes were sitting rather than the full members?
I'm sure that the officers would arrange for a separate site meeting for those that were not able to attend, if you speak very nicely to them. And we'll come on to that item and procedure in due course. So we're moving swiftly now on to item 4 on page 127, Frimley Hall Hotel. Are there any declarations on this item? I don't mean anybody that's walked past it or they've happened to have a cup of coffee at Christmas or anything. I want some proper declarations. No, and then I think it's Mrs. Pearman who is appearing in front of us very shortly.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Mrs. Pearman, and welcome.
Thank you. This application seeks permission for an extension to the existing hotel, which involves an extension and refurbishment to the existing 3rd floor and an extension on the eastern side of the building to enlarge the existing 1st and 2nd floor bedrooms. The application is very similar to previous permissions granted at the hotel which have not been implemented. It is recommended for permission. Frimley Hall Hotel is situated at the end of Lime Avenue within the settlement area of Camberley. It borders residential properties to the east and west in Lime Avenue and Frimley Hall Drive. There is a large car park surrounding the hotel and there are mature trees along the boundaries, so the property is fairly well screened from its neighbours. There is a separate health and fitness building on the western side of the car park, which has recently been granted permission to extend as well as under delegated powers. Most of the site is covered by a tree preservation order. This photo shows the front of the hotel, which is the reason for its locally listed designation. The front of the hotel will not be affected by the application, other than being able to see the 3rd floor extension behind it to a very limited degree, but this is not considered to harm this facade. The remainder of the building comprises largely flat roof 1970s additions. This site plan shows the proposed extensions on the eastern side of the building. Hopefully you can just about see those. They are shaded blue where my cursor is now. The extensions to the first and second floor on the eastern side would be 2 meters in depth approximately to extend the sizes of the existing rooms. No additional rooms would be added on the first and second floor. This is the eastern side of the building where the extensions are proposed. There will be some TPO trees lost on the eastern side, but there's sufficient space here for replacement. By way of replacement, 14 trees are proposed, which will be 7 in this area and a further 7 to the northeast. These will be a mixture of standard and extra heavy sizes. Further detail is proposed to be agreed by condition. This slide shows the eastern side boundary of the site and the mature vegetation on the boundary. The nearest properties in Lime Avenue are well screened from the proposed extension on this side. This shows the western side elevation. It was previously proposed to extend the western side of the building by a similar amount. However, there were objections from the arboricultural officer in this regard, given the number of TPO trees that would be lost as a result, which were closer to the building with limited space to replace. The applicant has therefore removed the proposed extensions to the western side as a result. This slide shows a proposed third floor. At the moment, the third floor comprises around 13 small rooms of accommodation, stores and offices, which the applicant states are largely unused. The proposal would replace these with 12 larger suites and 4 staff bedrooms or offices. The extended third floor would result in a height increase of approximately 2.5 to 3 meters. The extensions and refurbishment are likely to improve the look of this part of the hotel and are not considered to cause any issues in terms of amenity. This slide shows the proposed eastern and western elevations with the additional roof, and Juliet balconies would also be added to the eastern side and the new third floor. You can see below, this is the western side elevation, which would remain. It would just be the third floor that would be added. This slide shows the proposed north and south elevations. There are 2 north elevations because of the layout of the building. One is in the middle. For one of the north extensions, the third floor extension will be visible. The other north elevation and the southern elevation, which is the front of the building, are largely unaffected, other than being able to just see the roof of the extended hotel behind. This shows a view from the nearest property on Frimley Hall Drive, and it's well screened from this side also. There have been some concerns raised by residents about the use of Frimley Hall Drive by visitors and noise and disturbance from hotel guests. However, it is not considered that this application, given the limited number of additional rooms proposed, would affect either of these existing issues significantly, as the noise and disturbance appears to largely be related to existing events. Concern has also been raised about parking. However, it is noted that more parking is available now than was available at the time of the previous very similar application here, which was granted in 2014. The proposal will assist the hotel in its economic recovery, particularly from the recent difficult period during COVID. It is therefore considered that the proposal is acceptable, subject to the conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've actually written down 3 points, and maybe it's just a 4th one. I always thought that the top road coming in there was a private road, but clearly maybe not. The points that I put down are the routes for construction traffic, the hours of construction traffic, and also measures to avoid noise, construction noise and dust. Members, do you have any other comments? Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. Just a question on the loss of the TPO trees. I know that you said there would be ones replaced, and I was wondering, are they a like-for-like replacement of trees?
Before we go back to Mrs. Pearman, pick up the other point. Are there any other points? Councillor Mark Vannigan.
Thank you, Chair. I live near the hotel, and like you said, I walk past the hotel quite often. It's for me, the parking could be an issue. It could spill over into Lime only. I do appreciate what we have represented, that parking currently is adequate. Other problem is using a Frimley Drive itself. Frimley Drive for your information, Chair, it's a private road. So reluctantly, I must say, if a deal is not done properly with the owners of that road, traffic could start flowing into Crawley Drive, Crawley Ridge, rather. So it's an issue which I need clarification on. Thank you.
Right, Mrs. Pearman, there's a number of points there. Can I come back to this?
Okay, with regard to private road, Frimley Hall Drive is a private road, Lime Avenue isn't. The main entrance to the hotel is on Lime Avenue, and that's where certainly guests and staff, I believe, use to get into the hotel. There is a gate on Frimley Hall Drive, and I did ask the applicant when they use that, and he said it's kind of very infrequent, and I don't know, it seems to be there's a problem with people kind of parking on Frimley Hall Drive and walking in there, and I'm not sure what the hotel themselves can actually do about that, but they say the gate is not open, definitely not open for guests, not open for staff, so I'm not sure what more we can do on that really. Secondly, construction, we do have a condition for a construction management plan. We could certainly add, it's got issues on loading and unloading of plant materials and storage. We could add noise and dust to that condition, just to be clear that they make sure they include that. With regard to the trees, the detail is to be agreed by condition. There are 14 trees, which is more than are being lost, and we've asked for standard and extra heavy sizes, so they should be, you know, fairly substantial trees to replace those, not tiny trees. With regard to the parking, they have done a car park accumulation study which County Highways have looked at. County Highways also asked for a travel plan, which is being implemented as part of the condition. It's a limited number of additional bedrooms, and it appears from the car park accumulation study that there is sufficient parking on the site at the moment. There are no restrictions in Lime Avenue, but that would be something County Highways would have to look at if it became a problem.
Thank you for that. Can I just come back on your construction management plan? Yes, I think that there should be something regarding noise and dust and limiting of that, and I think the committee is in agreement with that. And I think the hours of construction traffic is important.
Yeah.
But certainly not on a Sunday, and the usual hours going up Lime Avenue, because there's a couple of there's one sharp corner on that. But I think that the committee would like to see that, I'm sure. Members, do you have any other points? Councillor Wheeler.
Okay, I'm just looking at some of the comments that have been made, objections that have been made by residents in relation to this. At the moment, it says that the hotel has 95 spaces for a 250 plus hotel for staff guests. Is that going to be adversely impacted by this? Will they remain? And what assurances can we try and make sure that those parking spaces are retained as car parking spaces during the construction period and aren't used to store equipment or anything suitable? Is there anything we can do to that respect so that there's not an overspill of parking? And if I've missed it, I apologise.
I can just come in. Condition 7, which Anna has already referred to, refers to the parking for vehicles, site personnel, operatives and visitors, storage of plants and materials. So we will look at those issues as part of that condition as well.
Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. This is just an observation on my part. I have stayed at this hotel on a great number of occasions, various different situations. Never once have I ever had a problem with parking there. And I understand from what's been said that the number of parking spaces has increased since the last time we stayed there. So I personally have no problem with the number of parking spaces in practice meeting the requirement of the hotel's guests. Thank you.
Councillor Tapper, you disappointed me. I thought you were going to come in and ask for the number of electric charging points, and you've missed out there. But Mrs. Beerman, can I just put a marker down that we would like as a committee, bearing in mind our green agenda, that there is an increase, where at all possible, of electric charging points. I think that has the approval of the committee. Can we put something on that score, please?
I think there is a condition already proposed for 4 fast charging sockets.
I was just testing, condition 8. Members, enough of this. We have a recommendation. Councillor Rise, I'll second that one. All those in favour of the proposal? That looks to be, yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, indeed, members. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On to item number 5 on page 155, Clews Lane, Bisley. Declarations, please. No. Mrs. Pearman again.
Thank you. There is an update for this application as a further objection was received after the report was written. The objection raises similar issues to those already raised by others. This application is for the use of a former plant nursery as horticulture, including the installation of a porter cabin and shipping container, plant staging areas, hard standing areas, and the extension of the existing vehicular access from Clews Lane. The application is recommended for refusal. The application site is in a field on the eastern side of Clews Lane in Bisley. The site lies outside the settlement area and within the green belt. This slide shows the aerial photo of the site. It is in a rural area and there are footpaths to the eastern side, as you can see, as well as St John the Baptist Church to the northeast. The access is to the western side of Clews Lane and there are mature trees along the northern side of the access and some on the southern side. Towards the top of the site, there is some hard standing and several buildings which comprise a field shelter, metal corrugated shed and a shipping container. There is also a close boarded fence, if you can see the straight line in the middle of the site, which has been erected just to the east of the hard standing area, partly separating this from the rest of the site. This is a view across the application site from the footpath, looking towards the fence with the hard standing beyond. As you can see, it's really open from the footpath. You can see right across the site. This is a view of the western side of the site where the hard standing and the buildings are currently located. And this is a view of the existing site access from Clews Lane. These are views of Clews Lane. You can see it's a narrow single track lane. The County Highway Authority has objected to the application because of the visibility splays at the site access and because of the increased use of Clews Lane by commercial vehicles. This shows the proposed porter cabin, which is proposed towards the western side of the site where the hard standing currently is situated. And this is the proposed site layout. The dark grey area is the proposed asphalt hard standing. This hard standing area would be gravel. The grey stripes are plant staging areas, which would be membranes, and the dotted area is the existing hard standing. Although, as we showed in the aerial photo, it doesn't fully cover that area, so the plan is not fully accurate in that regard. It's considered that while the use as horticulture in the Greenbelt is not inappropriate, and the proposed porter cabin and shipping container may support this use, there is excessive hard standing proposed, which is not considered to be justified. The hard standing is considered to cause a significant urbanising effect, which would be harmful in visual terms to the open and rural character of the area. It would also be clearly seen from the public footpath and St John's Church, which is listed as Grade 2 star. The proposal is therefore recommended for refusal, given the concerns regarding access and visibility onto Clews Lane, the increased use of Clews Lane, the excessive hard standing, which results in harm to the green belt, character and heritage, and in addition, the lack of information provided regarding the impact of the development on the mature trees. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Pearman. We have some speakers on this item. Firstly, Mrs. Oliver.
And Mr. Pearman, can you and stop sharing screen if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Oliver, you're on one screen, not on the other one. Right, well, we'll run with the one with the number of screens here. Ah, hello, you're there. As before, I'm not sure if you were here earlier, you have 4 minutes and you'll be told when you have 1 minute left, and the time will start whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, hello. My ancestors have lived in the village for over 100 years. My mother, siblings, son and I have had the pleasure of growing up in a rural greenbelt location. I feel compelled with my head and heart to speak on behalf of the residents of Bisley and future generations to object to this proposal. I'm a teacher and youth worker, and I'm only too aware of the positive effects of green spaces and nature for one's mental health, as well as being ever conscious of the climate crisis. In over 40 years, this land has been scarcely used for agriculture. It has not been used as a nursery for more than 35 years, and at that time was only partially used to grow small saplings. It is one of the few untouched areas of the village that still gives it its rural feel, with urbanisation cropping up all over. It is utilised by numerous walkers daily and is a retreat from the busyness of the roads and housing estates. It has come to a surprise to many residents that the land is even determined agricultural, most assuming it belongs to the diocese. The reason for this, the land is crossed by a public footpath which directly connects the Grade 2 listed church to the Holy Well. To develop the site would be to destroy the picturesque link between the two ancient sites of heritage asset. I've no doubt the reason the land is not to be used for has not been used for agricultural purposes for my whole lifetime is because it's simply unsuitable for that use. In your report, your officer comments that the site is in an area of low risk of flooding. However, the field is usually standing water, particularly towards the church perimeter. The land here is heavy clay, hence why Kiln Lane, a clay brickmaking site of days gone by, runs parallel. The last tenants to the field adjacent to the gardens of Invicta, Heston and Brickworth found it unsuitable to graze 2 horses due to waterlogging. There is often water runoff into these rear gardens as well as Clews Lane. Water runoff to Clews Lane happened so substantially in the last year during winter that the road was dangerously covered in ice for many days. To develop a hard standing and destroy the current route networks of established trees, grassland and shrubs in the area in favour of commercial horticulture would only worsen the problem. The impact of road safety and insufficient access is clear to see. In my lifetime, there have been near fatal and fatal accidents along this road, and increased access would serve to encourage people to again use it as a diversion from the A322, something the council previously tried to discourage with road closures and narrowing bollards. It would increase the danger to pedestrians significantly. The area has laid virtually untouched for decades. It is effectively rewilded and is a haven for flora and fauna. When I walked in the field yesterday, 2 roe deer were also enjoying it. There were rabbits, a field mouse and a red kite overhead. This is regular occurrence. It's disappointing the conservation consultant has not recognised damage to these ecosystems. Returning the land to agriculture and laying a hard standing will destroy homes of large and small wild mammals, invertebrates and birds. It's inconceivable that a working nursery would tolerate potentially destructive herbivores. Where are these displaced animals meant to go?
1 minute remaining.
It's pleasing to hear the applicant is considering to improve biodiversity and CO2 storage. However, the potential use of fertilisers and herbicides, along with ground disturbance of existing root structures and soil microbiomes, as well as the displacement of animals, is not a positive payoff. The hard standing and increases of road access width by far outweighs any benefits, especially if plants grown aren't native species. Finally, it's concerning to notice the later mentioned polytunnels and water tank were excluded from the plans. It further decreases my trust in the proposer, who was already known to have illegally buried waste and built hard standing without permission. If solid permanent structures such as these are allowed, it could pave the way for more permanent developments and building on the land. Willow Tree Cottage was built as a service property to the land and has been sectioned off and sold separately. Who is to say this would not happen again? I'd urge you to refuse this application due to the adverse impact on the beautiful built site.
Thank you very much indeed. Just say that, please, members, do you have any questions of planning nature of the speaker? No, thank you very much indeed. And now we have Ms. Lauren Wright and Mr. Norman Holden hopefully joining us.
Yes, good evening. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors. I'm speaking on behalf of some members of Bisley Residents Association. Their most serious concerns regarding this planning application relate to, firstly, increased traffic of commercial vehicles along a narrow rural lane. The stretch of Clues Lane between the junctions with Angelica Road and at one end and Church Lane at the other end is inadequate for vehicles larger than private cars. We feel strongly that regular attempted use of this stretch by larger vehicles should be potentially dangerous. Secondly, the requested use of the property as quoted in the planning application would be contrary to the rural non-commercial nature of this area. Indeed, we believe that a warning has been offered about potentially asking for change of use. Also, we inquire if greenbelt regulations have to be taken into consideration in this case. Thirdly, residents with homes adjacent to this property have already expressed concern about the adverse effect on their environment and general quality of life. So we echo the concerns of other Bisley residents that the development requested in this planning application would be wholly inappropriate and unsuitable. I'd like to hand over to Ms. Lauren Wright.
Thank you, Norman, and thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to speak on this application. I'm Lauren Wright and I live on Church Lane. I use Clues Lane and walk along the application site daily. It is clear with 105 objections from local residents, the parish council and authorities that this application is not welcome within the Greenbelt. I understand that the agricultural land used can be used for horticultural purposes, but the application proposed will bring with it a myriad of negative effects to the Greenbelt. I find it concerning that a 21 metre by 9.4 metre polytunnel and a 50,000 litre water tank, both sizable structures, are shown on the application drawings, but are not detailed on the proposed description, which is confusing. A storage unit, field shelter and an area of hard standing have already been added in recent years, which don't appear to have planning permission. I worry that further structures could be added without penalty. Aside from the horticultural structures, this application proposes a significant amount of hard standing, which would have an adverse effect on the openness of the Greenbelt. There is a swept path analysis plan included in the application showing the turning requirements to manoeuvre a HGV on the site. I imagine this is included to justify the need for a widened entrance and a longer and larger area of hard standing. However, a vehicle control list was also submitted, which suggests that the maximum size vehicle would be a large van or a small truck. Therefore, how is the need for a wider entrance or a larger area of hard standing justified? The hard standing would be clearly visible from the public footpath and have an urbanising effect on the rural Greenbelt. Clues Lane is regularly used by dog walkers, cyclists, horse riders, and also by children going to and from the Clues Lane play park or Bisley CFE school. And with no pavement, all must share the single track lane with highway traffic. Surrey County Council Highway Authority have recommended the proposal is refused as it would be detrimental to the safety of the regular road.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Lastly, within Surrey Heath, there have been numerous sites where planning permission has been granted to replace horticultural nurseries with housing. These are all within the Surrey Heath Greenbelt. Sienna Flora, Plants to Go, Little Heath Nursery and Hagthorne Farm are all former nurseries within Greenbelt but have been granted permission for residential housing. Should this application at Clues Lane be granted and development and urbanisation started, what prevents this site from following suit and becoming a start for residential development later down the line? With this application receiving over 105 objections, this surely shows how valuable this open space is to the local residents of Bisley. I therefore agree wholeheartedly with the recommendation of the case officer and that of the Surrey County Highways Authority that this application be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have any questions of planning nature for the speakers? No, thank you very much indeed to both of you. Councillor Mansfield, have I seen you on the screen somewhere?
Indeed, Mr. Chairman, I'm here.
Councillor Mansfield, you called this in. Would you like to explain to the committee why you did that? Whilst you're normally a member of this committee, on this occasion you are not, so you will not have a vote on the deliberations following the considerations, if I get that right.
Yeah, you did indeed, and I fully understand the rules. Mr. Chairman, members, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Mrs. Pearman for what is an excellent report. It's also, I note, quite interesting that on page 155, we've actually had some information from County Highways objecting to this on regards to the traffic, for traffic reasons. But I would also like to point out that the actual reasons for calling this in are due to the concerns raised by a number of local residents who have spoken to me personally and also have phoned me and have sent me emails. And the reasons for the objection, in my view, is the principles of development, conflict with the local plan, violation of Greenbelt policy, the character and the heritage, the residential amenity, the highways matters, and all the other matters that are therefore before you on page 158 and 159, members. But notwithstanding that, it's obviously the national policy, planning policy framework reasons for refusal, which are obviously clearly documented on page 160, which are CP1, CP2, CP8, CP11, CP14A, DM1, DM9. I'd also refer you to, and it has been highlighted this evening, page 163 on the hard copy, to item 7.4, which is quite an interesting one given this particular location and the surrounding amenity, is the impact on heritage and archaeology. Paragraph 199 of the NPPF advises that when considering the impact of the proposed development on the significance of a designed heritage asset, within that area, as has been pointed out, we have the church, but we also have the Holy Well, which is, that's the grade 2 listed Holy Well, along with St. John's the Baptist Church, which is almost adjacent to the property. So I fully support everything that's been said by the local residents. It's pleasing to see so many local residents speaking this evening and speaking so well. So I fully support the officer's recommendation, and I would ask members that you do so as well, outlined on paragraph on page 168, which is item 10. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Councillor Page, do you wish to comment? And again, the same, you as a ward councillor, you are able to speak, but again, you do not have a vote in the final deliberations. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman, for letting me speak. Yes, I'm the ward councillor for this area, and I must say I completely support the well-argued comments from the Bisley residents that we've heard tonight. This application should be refused, and Councillor Mansfield's quite right in what he says, so I don't really wish to repeat that, but just to summarise for you, it's inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. It has an impact on highway safety. Clues Lane is a very narrow rural lane and it cannot support HGVs. And even the highways expert that we heard earlier on at Surrey County Council objects to this. So well weighed in, Surrey County Council. Thank you very much. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question for the officers, if I may. I note that the current hard standing, which is obviously not the hard standing which is proposed in the proposal, but more covering the area in large gravel, has been in place sometime between 2016 2017. So the past 5 years that's been there. One of the speakers mentioned that this particular plot of land is used extensively for recreational purposes by local residents. I wonder if the owner of the land knows that and whether they sought permission to do that, since I assume this is private land. But my question is, if this hard standing has been here for 5 years, has there been any objection to enforcement to ask them to investigate the installation of this hard standing without permission, planning permission? And if so, what was the judgment of the enforcement officer? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pearman, I'm not sure if you know the answer to that.
Yeah, not as far as I'm aware. I'm not sure how long the council have actually been aware that there was hard standing there. Probably not for the last 5 years, but I don't know if I think we'd have to look at you know, how long it had been there and whether it's possible now to take any enforcement action, whether it's tied up with any kind of change of use of the site. That kind of detail hasn't been looked at as far as I'm aware. I don't know if John wants to add anything on that.
I haven't really got anything to add on that. I mean, we would obviously have to look at the aerial photography and other evidence we have to see how long it's been there. And in terms of the use of land, obviously that has always been, from the history that is available on the committee agenda, has been established as agriculture / horticulture. So we're not actually saying to change the use of land in that respect.
If I may follow up, then my second question is, if this is the case, then what justification is there for stating that the hard standing is a visual intrusion in the green belt? Clearly nobody has ever noticed it. Thank you.
Is that a question or a statement?
I would look for someone to rebut my argument.
The existing hard standing is quite limited, as we saw on the aerial photo. If I go back to that, so the hard standing at the moment is just this strip on the western side of the site. If you look at the site plan, there's a really significant amount of additional hard standing proposed. So this would be asphalt, the dark grey, which obviously is kind of a lot more significant urbanising feature than the existing kind of low level hard standing. So this would all be asphalt. This whole area in front of the fence would be hard standing. This hatched area would be gravel. So it would be almost the entire site covered with hard standing, compared to at the moment, just that small strip on the western side, which you can't see. Well, you can see it from the footpath over here, but you can't see it here because of the fence. So in the officer's opinion, it would be a really big difference to existing.
So may I ask, therefore, that if planning permission had been sought at the time for the installation of this hard standing, at the time, would we have approved it or refused it? Thank you.
Crystal ball. We'd have to consider that on the merits at the time. I can't possibly comment on that, unfortunately. But I think the report does recognise that hard standing was, albeit, you know, in terms of openness, clearly it doesn't have the same impact as a building. It still has an impact. And the MPPF assessment is whether or not there's more harm in the existing situation in terms of openness. And clearly in this particular case there is. And that's the assessment we've taken in terms of reason one.
Thank you for that. Members, we have an officer recommendation to refuse. Is there a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Rise, Councillor Betton, all those in agreement? That looks to be unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, members. Thank you, Mrs. Pearman.
Thank you.
Nice to see you there. That takes us to the end of the public part of the meeting. There is a further part for members only. So, members of the public, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you found it helpful and interesting. And we look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. Quick plug for that. Yeah, okay. Kirsty, can you